gentle ghosts, Halloween heist, and perfect pumpkins.
It truly was the perfect autumn day. It was cool, but the sun was bright. Recent early frost had turned the deciduous tree canopy to lush colors of gold, yellow, orange, and red. The colors were breathtaking. One could think a celestial artist from above had gone wild and used their artistry to touch each delicate leaf with alluring strokes of all of the vibrant shades on a painter's palette. All done for humanity's benefit to enjoy all of this beauty. Autumn had set in, but it was indeed a marvelous time of year. Grandmother and grandson walked slowly along the garden path as they made their way to the pumpkin patch. Most of the Gauthier gardens had long been harvested, but the hardy vegetables like potatoes, turnips, carrots, beets, and pumpkins remained, not yet harvested at this time in late October. The root vegetables deep in the soil were still protected from the frost, but today it was time to harvest the pumpkins. When the pair of friends arrived to survey the patch of large orange orbs, Granny looked to her grandchild and offered, "Well, Ricky, I think last night's frost got the best of the leaves and smaller vines, so it is time to bring these pumpkins into the woodshed. With all this bounty, we will be able to make many beautiful jars of preserves, and if your mother has the time, a few pumpkin pies as well." Yes, Granny, the pumpkin leaves did take a beating with last night's heavy frost, so indeed it is time to cut the gourds free and collect them. I think they are fabulous. I love these big orange balls. They sure do make great preserves and pies. But Granny, please, we must not forget the delight of fresh-baked pumpkin bread topped with brown sugar sauce. Do you think that maybe Mommy will be able to bake some pumpkin bread as well? Questioned Ricky. Granny smiled widely, shook her head from left to right, and responded, "Maybe, my lad, maybe." "Granny, did you want me to fetch the small wheelbarrow to help us bring these heavy babies in from the garden?" asked Ricky to his granny. She nodded yes to her grandson, and the boy ran off quickly to find and bring the old rusty metal wheelbarrow. By mid-morning, the two gardeners had harvested all of the pumpkins from the patch. Once they had loaded them gingerly into the reliable old wheelbarrow, they headed off towards the back of the house and the open door of the woodshed. One by one, they placed the well-developed fruit into the hay-filled bin in the back corner of the shed. When Ricky bent forward to the wheelbarrow and picked up the last weirdly stretched oblong pumpkin showing a half-green and orange shell, he asked, "Granny, do you think I could use this one to carve a jack-o'-lantern for Halloween night?" Granny stooped down and bent to take a closer look at the elongated pumpkin. She rose up again, straightened her back, and replied, "My beloved boy, this one is perfect for Halloween. It is green and orange and very spooky. I see no issue in you having this misfit for a spooky jack-o'-lantern." Ricky danced with joy and moved his special pumpkin to the other corner of the shed. Here it would remain safe until he was ready to carve it up with the scariest of faces. A ghostly face, thought Ricky, and just in time to scare the pants off of the first trick-or-treaters that would arrive. Once their work was done, the two chums moved to the front veranda and plopped themselves upon the comfy old porch sofa for a well-deserved break. Once seated comfortably, Ricky pulled his little legs under himself, turned to his grandmother, and asked, "Granny, do you believe in ghosts?" "Oh, yes, my dearest," confirmed Granny. "As you know, we believe that we all have a spirit or soul inside, and this part of us is what makes us alive. It is the part of us that makes us individually special. It is the part that goes way beyond the simple flesh and bones or physical makeup of a person. This special part of us gives us the sound of our voice, the feelings we hold deep in our hearts, our learning and wisdom, the twinkle in our eyes, and so on. When we die, this part of us leaves us and normally makes its way to heaven. However, sometimes, when someone dies tragically, a part or all of their spirit gets trapped here on earth. When that happens, that, my child, is what I call ghosts. Often it is up to us to try and help these poor lost spirits through prayer to find their eternal peace," explained Granny. Granny rubbed her eyes, folded her arms across her chest, and added, "Let me tell you a story about when I truly felt a visit from some ghosts. When I was a girl, I lost two of my most cherished neighbors and girlfriends. They were my age. We would walk to school together. Because we were neighbors and friends, we would often see each other and share stories, play games, or just help one another. We were all little girls, happy little girls growing up as friends. However, back in the old days, there was a time when a terrible disease came to our farms. It was called diphtheria. This sickness, my boy, was very contagious, and many families with ill members needed to have their homes quarantined. During quarantine, no visits were possible to those homes. Many people we knew got very sick and died. I was very fortunate to not get sick, but my two friends, the Durouin sisters, were not so lucky. They caught diphtheria and both died. Maria was only 5 years old, and her sister Anna was my age. She was 7. When the news was brought to us that they had passed, I was extremely saddened by the tragedy. I had cried for hours and was lucky to have my older siblings, Francis, Natalia, Victor, and Frank, to help me understand and accept the sudden loss of my dear friends. Though we could not enter their house because of the sickness, my eldest sister Frances sent me to their farm with a basket of food to offer in condolences to their dear grieving parents. I had also run out to the field that morning to gather a lovely bouquet of wild flowers to bring to the family as my little way to say farewell to my sweet girlfriends. As I approached the front of their little log house, a strong breeze came up out of nowhere. The winds rushing around the building suddenly made a set of wind chimes tinkle and clank. As I was about to knock on the door to leave my gifts, I felt a rush of warmth and the embrace of hugs, as I clearly heard, "We love you, Gertie, our friend," in my ears. You see, my boy, Gertie is my nickname. Everyone called me Gertie. Anyhow, I was so stunned by the experience that I dropped my flowers and the basket of fruit and bread on the doorstep and ran all the way back home. When I arrived home and my sister Natalia found me crying, I explained to her what had just transpired. Natalia told me not to be afraid because it was simply Anna and Maria's spirit's way of saying goodbye to me. Since that day, Ricky, I have believed in ghosts. "Oh, Granny," sighed Ricky. "Were you afraid?" he queried. "What happened after they died? Did you have a chance to say goodbye at their funeral?" he continued. "No, Ricky, because of the quarantine restrictions and regulations, no one except the family members from their own household could say goodbye in person. We were not allowed to attend the funeral ceremony because of the disease and its easy transmission. Maria and Anna were given a proper funeral, and both were buried in the cemetery adjacent to St. Charles Church. If you walk by there, you can still see a pair of old white-painted wooden crosses that marks their final resting place," whispered Granny. "Oh, goodness, Granny, I did not know this story before. I am sorry that you lost 2 of your friends," offered Ricky. Granny hugged the little lad, took off her glasses, and wiped her misty eyes. In a few moments, however, her sweet smile returned, and she gently squeezed her grandson's hand. She tilted her head and looked up at the trees, then returned her gaze to the boy and said, "After all these years, Ricky, I still remember my little friends. When I walk up to the post office or the grocery store, I often stop at the graveyard and remember them. When I look upon their graves, I still feel sad that they both died so young. Sometimes on windy days, I often hear the gentle sound of wind chimes off in the distance, and I clearly remember the day I stood on their front steps after they died. I know you may think your old grandmother is crazy, but right there as I stood in the cemetery, I also heard them whisper clearly in my ears, 'We love you, Gertie, our friend,'" divulged Granny. "Oh, Granny, so we have ghosts that haunt our little cemetery?" asked Ricky. "Yes, indeed, Ricky, but I tell you most honestly, they are indeed good little ghosts," declared Granny. Later that afternoon, little Ricky sat slumped at the kitchen table. He frowned, shrugged his shoulders, and scratched his head as he let out a big sigh. "Oh my, someone is frazzled," commented his mother Veronica as she entered the kitchen. "What's bothering you, my baby boy?" asked a concerned mother. "Well, Mommy, I want to go trick-or-treating with Audrey, her chums, and some of my new school pals next week, but I have little idea what to wear as a costume this year," confessed Ricky. "Well, there are many choices, Ricky. You could use some of the older costumes worn previously by your brothers. I am sure they are all upstairs in the big box behind the bedroom armoire in the boys' room. If I remember correctly, I am certain there is the clown costume Chris wore a few years ago. There has got to be the skeleton outfit that Brian wore last year, or perhaps the robot costume that Chris or Bernie made a few years ago, and lots of old clothing and stuff to dress up like a hobo, wizard, or a gangster," suggested Veronica. "Yeah, Mommy, all those choices are okay, but I want to be something spooky this year. Let me explain. Last Saturday afternoon, Audrey and I watched a lot of fun Halloween cartoons on television. These shows had phantoms and ghosts flying about scaring everyone. I especially enjoyed the Ghostly Trio in Casper the Ghost Halloween Special. Charlie Brown's friend Pigpen dressed like a ghost in It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, and the very cool spooks we saw in both the Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse Halloween specials. In all of these animations, there were some really freaky ghosts, and I was truly hoping to dress up as a ghost this year," declared Ricky. The predicament, though, Mommy, is that I do not have a ghost costume, sobbed Ricky. Veronica knelt at the table where her boy was sitting, embraced him, and kissed his forehead. Ricky turned his head to look at his mother and raised his hands to wipe his tears. Veronica smiled and said, "Don't fret, Ricky. If you want to be a ghost for Halloween, I can certainly use one of our old white bed sheets to make you the most frightening ghost costume possible." Ricky clapped his hands and nearly leaped from his chair. With joy in his heart, he hugged his mother and howled, "You are the greatest mommy ever. I truly love you." All Hallows Eve had arrived, which seemed to be like an instant from an adult's perspective. But for a child, it seemed like weeks had dragged on. The children everywhere were excited and pumped, as they patiently waited for dusk and darkness. They scurried about and fussed over last-minute preparations for their costumes and gorged on candy treats. Most homes were decorated with all types of Halloween paraphernalia, to include stretched cotton batten to resemble spider webs, paper or plastic skeletons, cardboard cutouts of witches, ghosts, black cats and bats, and of course beautifully carved jack-o'-lanterns. Ricky's carved jack-o'-lantern was already placed in a prominent spot, centered on the Gauthiers' home's front veranda. He and his brother Bernie had hoisted it up securely upon a sturdy antique tripod plant stand. Its face, with wide spooked eyes and screaming mouth, surely would frighten anyone who dared look at it high up on its perch. Its mysterious shaded contrast, because of its mixed green and orange color, gave the goblin a creepy look. The monster had nearly no nose, but did have deep sunken eyes and dark orangey pulp-filled pupils, which were made ever more evident by the flicker of a lit candle hidden inside of the pumpkin. "Hey, thanks for helping, Bernie. I think it looks great. It is nice and spooky, just the way I wanted it to look," professed Ricky. "Yeah, Ricky, it is a pretty cool pumpkin. You did a good job cutting out that scary face. Now that I have lit the candle for you, your phantom has nearly come to life with those fire-lit eyes," boasted Bernie. "Yeah, it sure does look spookily alive, Bernie. I appreciate your help with the matches because, as you know, I am not yet old enough to use matches. I want to grow up fast so I won't have all these restrictions. You are so lucky to be the eldest," babbled Ricky. Bernie smiled, turned to his brother, and said, "Well, don't wish to grow up too fast. It is best to enjoy being a boy, because when you get older, you often wish you were still young and carefree. Now come on, you better get a move on it. It is time for you to put on your costume. It is almost dark and time for going out for tricks or treats," hooted Bernie. Within the hour, little Ricky was outfitted in his spooky costume, and now thumped noisily down the stairs, howling, "Boo! Boo! Boo!" as he descended. When he reached the main floor, he turned, and with arms raised, he entered the kitchen. His mother and grandmother clapped with joy when they saw the excited little boy. "Oh, please, dark phantom, do not haunt me," shrieked Granny. "Oh, scary ghost from beyond the grave, do not frighten me," squealed Mommy.
Can you only imagine what happens next in this cute little Halloween story? Does Ricky go out trick-or-treating with his siblings? Does Ricky walk uptown and collect candy, or does he stay home? Does he actually go up to the cemetery? And what happens at that cemetery? Ooh boy, ghosts are all about. Can you only imagine what happens next in this cute little Halloween story? Does Ricky go out trick-or-treating with his siblings? Does Ricky walk uptown and collect candy, or does he stay home? Does he actually go up to the cemetery? And what happens at that cemetery? Ooh boy, ghosts are all about.